what does string theory have to do with free will? Follow me along as I share with you how our own ideas about our sense of self, our minds, and our psychology are interconnected with our ideas about the fundamental constituents of our universe, from particles to strings and so on. You see, before I'm doing what I'm doing now, which is hypnotherapy and psychology related methods, I was a theoretical physicist in academia and I was studying black holes and string theory. And here is the interesting thing. We have to go back to the beginning where all this started. We have to go back to the Enlightenment. The idea that, free will, of the idea that our own sense of self is fully determined by us, was brought in the Enlightenment. I mean, it started like from the Roman times, from the Stoics, but it was brought in the Enlightenment, and it really fitted of how we were thinking of the fundamental constituents of nature back then, right? So in terms of mind, back then we have this idea that the mind, is kind of like a fortress, kind of like a citadel, and we are fully self-determined. Think of this, how central it is in Western cultures about how we define ourselves and how we interact with each other, right? It connects to the notions of individuality, of free will, of agency. And here is the interesting thing. The idea we had about nature back then, right, is that the fundamental constituents of nature are like, hard billiard balls. And the only way they interact with each other are when they touch and they and they collide, okay? So there are like billiard balls that collide. And if they don't collide and they don't come in direct contact, they don't affect each other. They are all, each one is closed, right? Whether we think of atoms, each atom is like a billiard ball that's closed in its own entity. And that's the idea in Enlightenment we had about the self, to a large extent. So then, in the 20th century, we started developing quantum mechanics. And here is the interesting thing. In quantum mechanics, together with all, the weird quantum effects like tunneling and entanglement and all that, do you know how particles interact in quantum mechanics? In quantum mechanics, particles interact from distance, and particles can change into other particles. So things are much more interconnected. By this point, we have seen through the atom, we have seen that the atom is made of individual uh, pieces of matter, the particles, and not only that, how we think of particles, right? We are more agnostic about what particles are by this point. We still think of them as itemized things, okay? But when it comes to their trajectory, how they move, we don't know. We just have probabilities and we calculate the probabilities. But how they interact, are particles individual in how they interact? So in quantum mechanics, particles interact like this. So there are two particles like going their way, and then they interact by exchanging another particle between them. So they go like, whoop, they exchange a particle here, and then they go, whoop, in different directions, and they change. So they transmit some information to each other from distance, right? So things become a bit more vague because we can be from distance, but we still affect each other. We still exchange information. And as we start understanding how humans interact, how we each other at the human level, right? We transmit information unconsciously, even with our physical posture, even with our, hand gestures, like I'm doing right now. We realize that the mind is not so independent. We realize there are influences around us. And here's the interesting thing. If we go then even beyond, right? If we go to the 70s and 80s where string theory was started being developed. And, that's, if you think about it, that's like what all the new age stuff started coming. And all these like Eastern philosophies coming more and more and becoming more and more popular in the West. The interesting thing is that strings, how do strings interact, right? Like strings are still, itemized itemized components. Okay, if you have strings, that's just like you have a string here, it's like a loop, and you have another string here, and it's also like a loop. But strings interact by merging. Once two strings come together, they interact, and then they separate again. So strings as entities, even though they can exist distinctly, they are much less defined as a completely independent thing when they merge and then they separate. And if you think about it, human interactions are very much the same way, right? Sometimes we just transmit something to someone and we go and that's it. Like, it's like sending signals with the radio, right? But other times we go into these experiences with other people and we form these common shared realities that we are both immersed in them. And when I say both, I mean either two people or a group, right? Like when we say stories around the fire, or other when we are at a concert and we are all there experiencing the same moment in unison. So, what is the notion of individuality in these cases? What is the notion of free will? I mean, we can leave the concert, we can break the moment, we can separate our string from the combined string, but during this moment, we are not an individual string anymore. We are a collective string that has merged with all the other strings, with all the other existences that are there. And the more we realize that, the more we realize that free will is not a hard notion. Free will is a notion that depends on the circumstances. And it's interesting how, as we start realizing that about the mind and become more flexible, we start our science, the fundamental constituents of the world, develop theories that, reveal that to us as well. So the ideas follow similar path because there is something else here that's crucial that I really want you to know, that I really want you to put to heart. And if by this point, something like sticks out to you, let me know in the comments below. Write me like, yes, like, was there something new for you that you realized? Like, press love or leave a comment below. Because here's the thing, right? Does this mean, is there free will or there is no free will? But that's what this story teaches us, that these things don't operate in absolute. That's what science teaches us eventually about free will. You see, from a classical point of view, things operate like billiard balls, and from a classical point of view, there is this absolute fortress of the mind. And when we look deeper at different scales, then things become much more fluid, much more flexible, much more interconnected. And in a similar manner in our life, there are situations where, it's better to operate as purely our own sense of self. And there are other situations where we go at different scales, at different moments, where it's better to operate in the interconnectedness of things. So one of these important things for me is not whether free will exists or not, but it's more like how we can think of it differently and how we activate it differently in different circumstances according to what's needed. Because let's be honest, you wouldn't try to calculate, the motion of a bus with strings. That would take a ridiculous amount of effort. In a similar way, we can't be in this completely fluid, interconnected state all the time. We need to operate as individual entities. And other times, we need to immerse ourselves in the big. Does this resonate with you? Please follow, subscribe if this resonates with you, to let me know that this even it made a little spark inside you, even a spark of curiosity, because I would love to share more with you on that. So that's the interesting thing. And that's what string theory tells us about free will. I hope you enjoyed, and I'm excited to see you at the next one. Take care, everyone.